Hello and welcome back to this Orbiter 2016 video series. I'm Tex and this is episode 3 of Journey to Saturn. In the previous episode, we aligned our orbital plane with the plan and we conducted the injection burn. You can see we still have the Earth here just in view, but not for very long. We're going to coast out to Jupiter, conduct some mid-course correction burns. We will complete the Slingshot and probably get about halfway to Saturn, where we will conduct a little bit more of a complicated mid-course burn for our arrival at Saturn and Titan. So we have a lot to cover. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right into this episode. Okay, we're here in the cockpit, of course, and let's go ahead and just rotate the Deep Star here toward Earth so we can enjoy the view of Earth as we drift away from it. Yeah, it's always enjoyable to appreciate, our home as we drift away into the darkness of space, and I guess it's going to be a while until we get back to see it. So anyways, I'm also going to open up some external MFDs that I'm just going to use to help us with our navigation throughout the solar system. So I'm just going to position these in such a way that maybe makes sense and resize them a little bit here. Okay, so on this side, I'm going to open up TransX, and we will set that up on the Slingshot view, which is already done there. And let me make it a little bit bigger so hopefully it's easier for you guys to see. I just don't want to cover up my RCS buttons over there so I can see where we're set up as far as RCS goes. So that looks fine. We'll leave TransX on the bottom left side. On this side, let's open up IMFD down on the bottom, and we're going to open up the map program. And then on the top external MFD there, I have orbit open just so that we can monitor the G contribution on the bottom there as we escape Earth. And of course, we're going to use it to monitor the G contribution as we approach Jupiter. So this is looking good. Earth looks good there in the distance. So yeah, I'm just going to time accelerate now, and we can sort of enjoy the view as Earth drifts away. And then we're going to have to do some course corrections probably once we escape Earth, and we'll see how things actually worked out as far as the accuracy with our injection burn. Okay, that's always enjoyable, watching the Earth drift away, but we're just about out of Earth's SOI, and there you go. You can see stage 1 has updated on TransX on the left side. Actually see the moon just ahead of us there. That looks really cool. But yeah, you can see our closest approach is about 2.5, just now under 2.5 million kilometers off from Jupiter, but we didn't actually have a super close pass by Jupiter for the Sling. So that's honestly not that far off. You can see our top-down view there of our Sling past Jupiter. It is a little bit off. We can confirm that also from looking at the top MFD there, relative inclination and PE ratio, which is what I'm going to concern myself with. So we're going to do a course correction here in a moment. Let's just watch the closest approach. Actually, if we watch relative inclination and PE ratio, it is counting down. So the better time to do the course correction would be when those sort of reach a low point. But at the same time, I don't want to wait too long. I want to make sure that we're as close to on course as we can be from earlier in the flight. So we'll probably just use a little linear RCS for this. It's so close, it's not going to take very much adjustment at all. On the right side on IMFD map program over there, you can see our position leaving the Earth, and we're heading out toward Mars orbit. And then you can see the massive gap that we have to close between Mars orbit and Jupiter. So looks like we're about halfway between Earth's orbit and Mars now. So we'll continue coasting forward a little bit and just monitoring transx. I think we're probably going to do that course correction here in just a moment. Things don't look like they're moving a lot at this point. So let's go ahead and slow time down. And we'll turn the HUD back on. I'm going to go ahead and orient the ship prograde. And we'll probably just keep it that way for our as we traverse through the solar system, because it's just easier to conduct our course corrections using linear RCS when we're pointed in a direction that sort of makes sense. So prograde is the way to go. You can actually see on IMFD that our current position is exactly out at Mars orbit. So we're doing this first course correction basically at Mars orbit, and then we'll probably do a couple more on our way to Jupiter just to keep the relative inclination and PE ratio for the sling down to where they should be. So we're oriented prograde. We're going to use some linear RCS now. And it's going to take a little bit of outward or inward and up and down. So basically using 1 and 3 on the numpad and 8 and 2 also on the numpad to adjust the PE ratio and relative inclination. So we want PE ratio on 1. That's pretty good where it's at. Just tweaking relative inclination now, and there's 0. So I don't think we need to worry ourselves with anything beyond that. That looks fine. So we can time accelerate again. So we're back at maximum time acceleration, and I'm not actually speeding the video up here just because I felt like you guys might get a little bit more of appreciation of the distances involved going to the outer solar system here. So hopefully things aren't too boring. I'm going to try and narrate as much as I can, and maybe we'll fill in with some music here and there. But at this point, you can see the top-down view on the bottom left MFD there of TransX. You can see Jupiter's in the center, and you can see our green curve of our trajectory coming around Jupiter. Underneath of our green trajectory there is a dashed yellow line, and the dashed yellow line is where we're supposed to be according to the plan. And because our green trajectory is laying exactly on top of it, we are dead smack on course. That directly correlates with what we're seeing on the top TransX MFD when relative inclination is on 0 and PE ratio is about 1 or as close as it can be. The top-down view on the bottom there is going to be spot on. So you can see PE ratio is actually dropped a little bit under 1, but it's still pretty close. It is slipping off a little bit more as time goes by. So you can start to see the green curve starting to slip off of that dashed yellow line just a bit. And we're just going to make small corrections with our linear RCS as we traverse out to Jupiter just to keep things on course. But I mean, honestly, at this point, it's not even worth tracking what we've spent so far in our fuel log. I think we'll probably just wait until our final course correction at Jupiter encounter, and then we'll see how much fuel we actually used for the mid-course corrections between Earth and Jupiter. So you can see on IMFD we're actually about halfway to Jupiter, or about halfway between Mars orbit and Jupiter anyways. So this is probably a good time to go ahead and reference Jupiter on the orbit MFD on the top right, external MFD. I've just done that. You can see we're still not experiencing any gravity from Jupiter, but it won't be long. We'll start to see the G increase from 0 to 0.01. So we're still at maximum time acceleration here, and it looks like our PE ratio has slipped off a bit more. So let's go back to normal time here. And I'm not even going to orient the ship here. I'm just going to use some linear RCS. And we're just going to swing PE ratio back to 1. Relative inclination on 0, as close as we can get it. I'm honestly having to use the control key. That's how little thrust it's actually taking to adjust that. And I'm having trouble getting relative inclination exactly on 0. But again, you can see the top-down view on the bottom left side. I mean, we're spot on course, so no issues there. We're back at maximum time acceleration here. And we're just going to sit back and enjoy the trip here for a minute. And we might have to do one more little linear RCS correction, but we'll come back and talk about things as we approach Jupiter's strong SOI and we do the final course correction. Okay, we're on final approach for Jupiter. You can see the G-field contribution is just about at 50 or 0.50. So we're just making a small linear RCS adjustment, and there we go. PE ratio is perfectly on 1. Relative inclination as low as it can get there. So that is our final course correction for Jupiter. Let's take a look at our total delta V remaining, 73,189 meters per second. So we're going to just input that into here. I'm not going to concern myself with how many days it's been. We're just going to track the fuel itself. So we used a total of 34 meters per second for our mid-course corrections from Earth to Jupiter. So that's not bad at all. So we'll take that. Okay, so hopping back into orbiter here, let's go back to IMFD on the right side. And we don't really need to keep Jupiter targeted anymore, but we'll just zoom in here so that we can actually see our approach to Jupiter. And you'll actually see how the sling works as we approach Jupiter, or I should say as us and Jupiter approach each other. So it's kind of cool to actually watch it on IMFD. But yeah, you can see we are now within Jupiter's SOI, or at least strong SOI, that is. So we're just going to point prograde here relative to Jupiter. And yeah, we just had to do some time acceleration with the video because it's just too far. It's just too far. Too much time, too much distance to get out here to the outer solar system. I can't imagine a flight to Pluto. I've done it before, and it takes insanely a long amount of time. I think I was at maximum time acceleration, and I literally had time to run errands, do the dishes, practice the piano. I mean, it was insane. I came back and we still weren't at Pluto. So if we ever do a video going out to Pluto, we're gonna have to do some serious editing. But anyways, you can see us approaching Jupiter here. Everything looks good. We'll just continue adjusting IMFD so we can see our approach, and you can see actually as we're approaching, as Jupiter and us are approaching each other, you'll see how our trajectory is going to take us by Jupiter, and then the sling is actually going to adjust the angle of our trajectory out towards Saturn. You can actually see the curve of that happening. So that's pretty awesome to watch. So let's just get IMFD set up here. Let's maybe just go ahead and center on Jupiter so we can watch our approach past Jupiter. And yeah, I don't know, let's maybe just enjoy the views here for a minute, because I think this is sort of a highlight of our trip, is being able to fly by Jupiter here and just enjoy the views. So so let's put a little music up and just enjoy the view, and we'll come back for our escape from Jupiter and probably the mid-course correction out to Saturn. So we'll see you in a bit. Okay, we are now halfway between Jupiter and Saturn. The G-field contribution for Jupiter has reached 0.01. That's honestly the lowest it's going to reach. So this is a good time to go ahead and do our first course correction. On IMFD on the right side, I've went ahead and referenced Saturn. Let's just target Titan for a moment so we can find where it's at, and that is Titan's orbit there. We'll change the projection to perhaps equator. Now we want to target the equator of Saturn actually right now. We do not want to target Titan yet, so that is important. On the left MFD, let's open up orbit and let's go to, let's reference Saturn and let's target Titan. Okay, so that's fine. We don't really need the display. We're just going to concern ourselves with the numbers there. Okay, so we have linear RCS activated for now. Let's take a look at our periapsis at Saturn is actually 6.4 million kilometers. Obviously, we need to bring that down because we want to take advantage of the Oberth effect, which we calculated already. So we need to bring our periapsis down to about 3,000 kilometers above Saturn's surface. That ensures that we're just above Saturn's atmosphere. So there you can see it's coming down. Very nice. Okay, so we brought our periapsis down. We need to bring it closer. However, we also want to swing that line of nodes, that dashed line going through the center of Saturn there. We want to swing that around so that it lays directly over our periapsis. So all I'm using at this point is just some linear RCS. I'm using outward and so number 1, number 3, and then plane change number 8, number 2 on the keypad. And I'm just doing that to ensure that we get that line of nodes laying directly over our periapsis, and then make sure PEA is right about 3,000 kilometers. So it's a little high still. It's at 6,000. There's 5,000. You can see just one little bump just brings it down a bunch. But also pay attention to relative inclination up on the top of IMFD. We don't want it to be retrograde. We want to make sure we're coming in prograde. So it's at 26 degrees now, 27. So that's fine. We are coming in prograde. So I'm just making these small adjustments here, getting that line of nodes sitting right on periapsis, and periapsis right at 3,000 or close to it. That's 27, but you know, there's 3. Perfect. Okay, that will work. So what will happen when we encounter Saturn is we will do a capture burn at our periapsis, which we just set up at 3,000 kilometers. And we'll continue burning until our apoapsis comes down to the altitude of Titan's orbit. So bear with me here. What we need to do essentially is calculate it so that when we coast up to our apoapsis after our capture burn, that both us and Titan are there at the same time, so we can then encounter Titan. So this is where we need to calculate what angle Titan should be at relative to our apoapsis, and that is going to help us ensure that we encounter Titan right after our capture burn at Saturn. So we can do that pretty easily. If we open up our spreadsheet that we calculated for the 2-burn solution, and we consider what was the additional time of flight days. In our case, it was 3.03 days. And we also look at what is Titan's orbital period. On the right side of the spreadsheet, we can see it's 15.95 days. So we're going to take our additional time of flight days, 3.03, divide that by Titan's orbital period, 15.95 days, and then we're going to multiply that by 360 degrees. That gives us an angle of 68.4 degrees relative to our apoapsis. Now I've opened up this free protractor here, and I'll put a link in the description below where you too can download it. This is going to be helpful for us to calculate where Titan's position should be. So the first thing I'm going to do is move this protractor into the center of Saturn on IMFD. Get it perfectly centered up as good as you can. Then what I want to do is rotate it so the bottom of the protractor lays directly over that line of nodes and our periapsis. But it's important that where 0 degrees is on the protractor is at our periapsis, so make sure you rotate it the correct way. Now I've done that because it's easier to line this up on our periapsis in the line of nodes because we can see it. Right now we cannot see our apoapsis. So since we're going to take the angle from our periapsis, we just need to convert what we've already calculated the angle was from our apoapsis. That's pretty easy to do. So we'll just take 180, which is half of 360, of course. So we're going to take 180 minus the angle we calculated was 68.4 degrees. That gives us a new angle of 111.6 degrees. So the angle Titan should be relative to our periapsis is 111.6 degrees. So all we have to do is, if you'll see this protractor, if I start at where our periapsis is at 0 degrees, and I move it counterclockwise, the direction Titan is orbiting Saturn, you'll see that the angle is increasing. Now I want that angle to be at 111.6. We're just going to get that as close as we can, somewhere in here. It might be helpful to temporarily target Titan so that you can see clearly where its orbit is and where Titan is in its orbit before you actually move your protractor to 111.6 degrees. So if you haven't done that, you can just go ahead and do that very quickly and then move your mouse back over until you see the angle of 111.6 degrees on the protractor, or as close as you can get it. And then what you want to do is just leave the mouse there and speed time up until Titan moves along its orbit and is lined up with that angle. So now that Titan is sitting directly over the angle that we calculated, what we need to do is we need to arrange it so that our PET, shown on IMFD there, the second line down below relative inclination, that is the time to our periapsis. When Titan is sitting at that angle that we calculated, we need to arrange it so that our PET is a multiple of Titan's orbital period. We can see what Titan's orbital period is in seconds from the orbit MFD when we have Titan targeted. Looking at T for time, you can see it's 1,378,000 seconds. So that's how long in seconds it takes Titan to orbit Saturn one time. So if we take our PET, which is 35,320,000 seconds, and divide that by Titan's orbital period, which is 1,378,000 seconds, we want to make sure that it is a multiple. And in this case, it is not a multiple. In fact, it's almost in the middle, but it's a little bit past. So in this case, it would make more sense for us to slow down. So in other words, it would make more sense for us to increase the time that it's going to take for us to reach periapsis. So that's sort of unfortunate because that means it's going to take more fuel than if it was closer to being a multiple of Titan's orbital period. So if we take Titan's orbital period, multiply it by 26, that gives us 35,828,000. So in other words, we want our PET to be 35.83. So looking at IMFD over there, it's 35.32 right now. So we would want to increase our PET to 35.83. So we'll make a note of that, write that down, 35.83, and we can close the calculator. Now, how do we do that? How do we increase our PET? Well, we would slow down. If we slow down, then we're increasing the time it's going to take for us to reach periapsis at Saturn. Where if we sped up, obviously we'd get to Saturn. We would get to Saturn quicker, and therefore we would get to our periapsis quicker. So since it was slightly over halfway, I mean, I guess this would be the more efficient way to do it. It's kind of sucks that it was that close to halfway. So that means this course correction is probably actually going to take quite a bit of fuel here. But it's important that we're doing this far away from Saturn so that we minimize that fuel expenditure. So you can actually see our periapsis has fallen below the surface of Saturn, but we're not concerned about that just yet. We're going to fix that. We're going to bring it back up to 3,000 kilometers above the surface. And this is only the first course correction we're doing for our arrival at Titan and Saturn. We're going to have to do this basically every time the PET halves. We're going to do it again. And we're going to have to do it probably a couple of times until we get closer to Saturn and things get more accurate and they don't slip off as much, I guess, so to speak. So I'm just pointing retrograde because we know we're going to have to slow down, and in order to increase our time to periapsis by that much, it's just going to be better to use our main engines. So when I burn with the main engines, when I burn retrograde, I'm also going to have to use linear RCS, probably outward or inward. I'm probably going to have to use inward linear RCS as I'm burning in order to keep our periapsis from slipping out too far away from Saturn. So you can actually see I'm burning with the main engines now. I'm not using the full power of the engines. Just put a little bit of power in. We might increase it a bit more. So we're just pointed retrograde here, and we're just going to keep burning with our main engines here, using some linear RCS to try and keep our periapsis down relatively close to Saturn. We'll fine-tune that once we get PET set. So PET, again, we're looking for that to get at 35.83, and it is increasing, 35.55 now. So we've got a little bit more to go, so let's just keep burning here. And then we're going to take note actually how much delta V this is going to take, but I'm guessing this is probably going to take several hundred meters per second here, which is way over what I calculated, but I guess again, it's a good thing that Deep Star has plenty of delta V here. Okay, so we're getting closer now. PET's at 35.77, 78, just about there. Okay, there's 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3. So engine cut off. So PET looks good. Let's go ahead and adjust our periapsis and make sure that that line of nodes also sits right on our periapsis. So just use a little bit of linear RCS and translate up and down to adjust the plane. Also make sure you're still coming in prograde, so relative inclination looks good. It's under 90 degrees anyways, I should say. Okay, so PEA 20, honestly, you know, if you get it around 2,900 kilometers, that's fine. The atmosphere, I think, technically cuts off at 2,900, so that's looking good. Yeah, there we go. So we've got PET perfectly set up. It's a multiple of Titan's orbit, and we've got periapsis right at 3,000 kilometers, and the line of nodes is sitting right on periapsis. So let's take a note of our fuel. 72,620 meters per second remaining. So we're going to hop over to our spreadsheet, and let's put that in to our fuel log and see just how bad things came out here. So 72,620, there we go. Okay, and so wow. Okay, so that ended up taking 569 meters per second. Ouch. That one hurt a little bit. But I think any further course corrections we need to make are just going to be, you know, small amounts of linear RCS. So I guess we got the big one out of the way while we were still far away from Saturn. So I don't know. I don't recall it taking that much when I've done this maneuver in the past, but I could be mistaken. I think the reason is because unfortunately the way the timing worked out with Titan's orbital period and where we were. In any case, we're about halfway to Saturn. We've got the first major course correction complete, and that is going to wrap up this episode. So in the next episode, we're going to be obviously encountering Saturn, doing the capture burn, and also probably orbital insertion at Titan. So hope you guys are as excited as I am. There's some fun times to come. And as always, I really appreciate you guys watching and following the series. I hope you guys are all doing really well, and I wish you all the best. Until next time, guys, take care, and we'll see you then.